Hi, this is Derek Tyler Attico, and you're listening to the FSF PopCast.
The show that interviews writers who wish we used our delete button when writing our jokes.
Accurate.
Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund, which supports the Wish Upon a Teen Foundation that helps out sick kids when they need it most. And just imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt crewman number 2332. He'll know that when he puts on the red shirt and joins the crew of the Enterprise in their struggle against the Cardassians, that he didn't leave his family destitute and without hope, because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back, and what's left of his phaser.
All right, guys, our guest today is a science fiction author, essayist, and photographer. He's won the Excellence in Playwriting Award from the Dramatists Guild of America. He is also a two-time winner of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds short story contest. And he's also a contributing writer for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game and an RPG designer himself.
And Tim's a plagiarist.
Tim's a massive plagiarist, and he's okay with it. Because, look, if I find an introduction for somebody that's better than what I was going to write, I'm going to take it off their website or off their Amazon description, and I'm going to use it to my own advantage. But it's not really plagiarizing if I tell you that I'm using your stuff. Therefore, welcome Derek Tyler Attico to the FSF PopCast. Welcome, Derek.
Tim, thank you for having me. It's great to be here, man. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you. We'll give it a couple minutes, and he's going to be like, yeah, what did I do here? All right. So, Derek, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because a few months back, I saw a note about a book that you were going to have releasing, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. Now, at that time, we had a couple other writers on the show, and was one of the things that we want to have more of is talk to more writers on the show about what they're doing. And we had just had, I think it was John Jackson Miller who just came on the show to promote his Star Trek Strange New Worlds book, The High Country. And then I think it was like almost like 2 or 3 Facebook posts below that, I saw this ad that you had put up for something that you were going to be showing. And I was like, oh, well, that looks cool. So, yeah, that book that we're talking about is the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. For those who are listening, yes, that Benjamin Sisko, Captain Benjamin Sisko. So if you would, please, Derek, tell us about how this book came to be and why you chose to write about Captain Sisko.
The autobiography, thank you, Tim. The autobiography of Captain Benjamin Sisko is being released by Titan Books. Titan is doing a series of autobiographies of starship captains that have had a series. So it started with Captain Kirk. They've done Spock, they've done Picard, and they've done Captain Janeway. And so now, at long last, in time for the 30th anniversary of Deep Space Nine, they are doing Captain Benjamin Lafayette Sisko. I came on board to the project a little bit of a sideways way. Someone was doing a podcast, and they had noticed that Sisko's biography had been skipped over because they had did Picard and then they went to Janeway. And someone said, well, when are we going to get Sisko autobiography? And someone on Twitter said, oh, wow, if they do a Sisko autobiography, this guy Attico, he wrote a Star Trek Strange New Worlds short story for the 2016 50th anniversary of Star Trek, which was a Benny Russell story. He'd be great to write it. That got some traction on Twitter. About a year after that or so, Titan saw that, read the story, and reached out to me. It's crazy. And so we had a discussion, and after that discussion, I was given the project.
I think it's kind of interesting, how because we've talked with a couple different authors. We talked with Dayton Ward, we talked with John Jackson Miller, right. and about their particular Star Trek books. And it's like, well, how'd you come? And each one of you guys has this really interesting story about how you got into your books. Like one of Dayton's, he was like, he went in to pitch one book, and they're like, yeah, that's great, but what about this one?
Right. Right.
And so, it's just kind of interesting to me about how that whole process kind of works out, especially with this, where it's like, somebody on Twitter is like, yeah, that Attico guy, yeah, give him a shot at it.
Give him a
you
shot.
know?
Yeah, and it was a lot of it was really cool because when I wrote that short story, it's a Benny Russell continuation from Far Beyond the Stars. I wrote the story I wanted to write. So I really wasn't thinking about what the fans would think or anyone would think. I just wrote the story I wanted to write. And I was lucky that got into the anniversary edition for The Strange New Worlds. Titan liked it. I spoke to George Sanderson, who's the managing editor for Titan Books. And we were just talking about that story. We were talking about the idea and our love of Star Trek and Deep Space Nine and kind of any ideas I had for Sisko autobiography, because I had some, of course. I mean, as a writer, you have some ideas of where you would want to take it if you ever were so fortunate to have a project. And one of the ideas that Titan had was because Jake Sisko is an author on Deep Space Nine, was that Jake would basically be doing in canon, in the story, in the show, Jake has written a book called Anselm, and that's like autobiographical. And so one of the ideas was that I would just write that as Jake and put elements of Ben's life in that. And I kind of didn't agree with that because I thought, well, the autobiographies that we've seen thus far have been from the captains in their own words. So this should be Benjamin Sisko in his own words, And when I told George my idea of how we could accomplish that, he liked it. He was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I like that. I like to see where you're going. We can do that." And I think it was because he'd read my short story and he liked my vision for the autobiography. I think those two things combined. He was like, "All right," and I got the project. So I was happy to do that. But then it was off to the races, because once you get it, then you have to deliver, right? So then it was off to the races. But it was a lot of it was challenging, but it was a lot of fun to bring Ben Sisko's origin story to life.
That's very cool. I see, and those are the type of stories that I like, when you get to see something beyond what you see in the films or the TV shows, something that gets you to tell, which we talked pre-show a little bit about Star Wars as well. It's one of the reasons. And calm down, Trekkies. We're cool here. But this was one of the things I liked with Star Wars is when they released the animated series, because it gave so much more detail and helped explain how we got from here to here, and and all these loose pieces in the middle. And so that's one of the things I think I'll look forward to most about your book, is that, so we've seen Sisko and in the episodes of Deep Space Nine, and getting to see him and who he was and how he was and all these different things. But there's this whole other story to him before the point of episode 1, season 1. And I think those types of origin stories to me are always very cool.
That's exactly right. And I'm the kind of person, the kind of writer where I don't come at things necessarily head on, because I think I never try and do things that are expected. I want to do things that are unexpected. And also, I've read the other 4 autobiographies, and they're really good, really good. So you don't want to kind of, even though these are other individuals' lives, you don't want to kind of retread and repeat other material. So the challenge, as each biography, as each new captain, you want to not necessarily top it, but you want to present something that's very different for the reader, because there are people that have obviously read the other 4, and you don't want them to feel like, oh, well, I've read this in maybe Kirk's life, or I've read this in Picard or Janeway's life. You want to give them something totally different. So I came at some things from different angles that I think will give people a little bit of surprises, I think. I hope.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So in other projects that you've got, because why just have one project? That's no fun.
That's no fun.
No fun. And being nerds are never, we don't focus on one thing, but we all seem, at least I feel the 3 of us here, enjoy playing role-playing games. And you wrote material for the Star Trek RPG, both for the Alpha and the Delta Quadrant source books, as well as the Klingon Core rulebook, which sounds fantastic to me. And I'm thinking that our podcast group might need to venture outside of the Star Wars RPG and into the Trek RPG pretty soon. I think we might need to do that.
Very interesting.
Point.
I may have sent your husband a note.
Oh, of course. I'm sure you did. So my question is, are you a gamer yourself?
I am a gamer. I am. That's how I first started writing, was playing role-playing games and playing D&D. That's how I really started long-form writing, was writing campaigns.
That is awesome.
That is very cool.
Awesome. That is like the best way to get into long-form
It really
writing.
is.
Like,
see, right, exactly. Guys, that's how I started. And my friends, I wrote a campaign and my friends enjoyed it. And that kind of enthusiastic feedback, I couldn't have been more than 13, 14, probably around there. And that encouragement was really great. And so then I just was off to the races, writing campaigns and GMing. And yeah, after that, I just really was like writing like all the time. And I've never really had a lot of formal education when it comes to writing, you know. Once I got to college, I had some classes and stuff, but a lot of it has been self-taught. And just a lot of reading, a lot of ingesting of material. And role-playing really, I was just talking about this today, that role-playing really was the impetus for a lot of things in my life and creatively. And that theater of the mind, you know, really started a lot of things for me. And with Star Trek Adventures, what's really great is Jim Johnson, the editor for Star Trek Adventures, he is an alumnus from Strange New Worlds. He was also was one of the short story winners from Strange New Worlds when they was a Strange New Worlds anthology, and he pulled me into Star Trek Adventures, and it was just a blessing to be able to write for Star Trek Adventures. And I did like a few just short blurbs for the Alpha Quadrant book. I think I did like the last Mayday of Enterprise D as it was going down, Meridian 3, which was really cool. When it came to the Delta Quadrant book, I did the chapter, The World of the Delta Quadrant. He gave me the whole chapter of the world to do, which was really cool, but like so much pressure because then I had to figure out what worlds to pick for that book.
Right.
Out of 7 years of Voyager, what worlds is going to represent?
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So then the way I thought about it, I was like, well, okay, well, what worlds, if we were at the Voyager Museum, what worlds would they put like at the forefront? You know, and those were the worlds that I highlighted in the book.
That's a really good way to think about it. Also, you got all excited about Tim's dice, and I'm over here with the. But come on, one's dice over there is not impressive.
She's looking at mine like rookie.
I like that. I like
35 sets of dice.
I am a rookie to RPGs, so.
He is a rookie to RPGs. He had never played one until a year ago. When we started playing the Saga edition of the Star Wars RPG for our podcast.
That's a good one too. Yeah, that's
it is.
Well, you'll see. Growing up, there weren't a lot of people around me that I hung out with that played RPGs, and so if we played an RPG, it was on Nintendo. You know, like Final Fantasy or something like that. That was the style of RPGs that we played. So we never played tabletop games. So yeah, it was about a year. Well, almost a year and a half ago, wasn't it? Yeah. And her husband, John, who is the GM of our game, and then also the editor of our show, was like, hey, so I call him Producer John. Producer John was like, hey, why don't we do a Star Wars RPG on one of our live show nights? It'll be a lot of fun, and, you know, maybe we'll get some views out of it. And then I was like, well, who cares if we get views out of it? It just sounds really cool. I want to try it now. I'm like, because I'd always wanted to try a game, and we had been talking, I think, up before that point, right around 2020, in the year that wasn't, you know, we had kind of talked about getting together and doing it, but then, you know, then there was the whole you stay away from me, I stay away from you thing. And and so we delayed it all, and then we're like, well, screw it, let's just do it virtually, while in one of our live shows. So that's what we do now. So once a month, the first Monday of every month at 6:30 Eastern, we play a game.
That's beautiful. And I think certain franchises, Star Wars, Star Trek, are just made for role playing, because the world building is already set up. People know it, love it. They can just jump in, especially if the rule sets are easy and adaptable, like both of those are. Then the rules get out the way and allow the storytelling and the play to take over.
Oh yeah.
And people can just jump in, and and I love that.
I love when it's the rules say, but the story says.
Right.
And one of the great things too is I find is that, you were saying how the worlds are kind of infinite, but also the storylines are the possibilities for different storylines, because in every year, every episode, there's always some new character that pops up that we've never met before. So you don't have to go with an established character. You can create your own thing. You can do your own thing. And that was, to me, when we were getting started in this, outside of the nervousness of, golly, I've never done this before, I hope I don't suck, was the idea that I could be anybody in the Star Wars universe, be anything, and then I decided to be something that looks like 17 billion other things. I'm a clone. So I'm a clone trooper.
You know what though? That's dope. I never even thought about playing a clone. The last time I played Star Wars, I played a droid. And I had never played a droid before, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool, the idea of playing a droid. But yeah, clone, that's really cool too.
And it's a very dangerous time to be a clone.
Oh, I can imagine, right? Because what era? I mean, are you pre-order 66?
Post.
We are post 66.
Oh man, yeah.
Post 66. And this is the era where either the clones were being killed by the Republic, or by the Empire rather, or leaving the Empire,
Yeah. Oh, but that's just so much fertile ground to play, man. Because
it is
individuality, as opposed to you were a cog in the machine, and now you're an individual, and as a writer, I can you can sink your teeth into that. So that's great stuff.
And he's
there you go.
So he's a clone that's traveling with a Trandoshan.
Trandoshan, yeah. A Wookiee.
A Wookiee.
What is Zap? What species is he?
He's the same as Darth Maul.
Oh, he's a Darth
Zabrak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zabrak.
Yeah.
And then
where the witches come from, right? Yeah.
From Darth Mirian.
And then we have a B2 battle droid.
Woo!
Yeah.
But he's
been reprogrammed as a pirate.
Like if you combine a B2 battle droid and Steve the pirate from Dodgeball.
Pretty accurate. With just a little bit of the captain from Pirates of the Caribbean, whose name I can't remember all of a sudden.
Captain Jack.
Captain Jack,
thank you. Just a little bit. Yeah, it's just insane.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful level of chaos.
Yeah, that is really a motley crew. I like that.
It is. And especially because of where they are in the timeline, technically the Wookiee would still be under slave laws.
Oh, right.
To the Trandoshan. Right. But we've flipped it on its head. Friends. They are best friends. We flipped it on its head.
Right.
And now we use that as a cover so that the Wookiee can go where she wants to go.
Nice.
Because she's actually secretly a noble who's escaped, and it's all sorts of.
Yeah, there's all kinds of.
And then we're working for the Hutts.
And going up against Sable Dawn at the same time, and all kinds of different stuff.
Oh yeah, see, this is great.
My husband had this huge battle planned for us last time, and he was expecting it to go on 45 minutes, an hour, 20 minutes in, and his big bad evil guy for that fight was at negative 35 hit points, and it's the oops. That went faster than we expected it to.
And that spontaneity in role playing is I think one of the reasons that my brain in my formative years as a writer, because everything I ever planned out in a campaign, I don't think ever happened the way I planned it.
Oh no, never.
And those are the best stories because people do erratic things because we're never go according to plan on the story. And so that's what makes it so exciting, and regardless of what you're playing, Star Wars, Star Trek, or anything else. And that's what's so cool. So yeah, that you guys must be having a blast. That's
we really are. Really are. It was just so funny though, is when it was my turn finally. I had rolled low in the initiative. I had gotten hit and I had taken 15 points of damage, but then I'm a Wookiee, I can rage.
Oh, right, that's right. Rage is a
thing with the Wookiees. So then I got 10 of my hit points back, but then I rolled a nat 20 on my attack while raging, and then did 3d10 plus 4 times 2 damage, and I'm like,
yeah, you just murdered it. That's
pretty much.
His boots were left, but that was it.
My favorite comment by John was something to the effect of, well, that's all I had planned. So what do we do next?
Right.
And then we somehow because he was like, this is going to be it's going to be a big fight night, and I don't know if you guys are going to survive. And then we turned it into a shopping episode. I'm like,
that's what happens. Wild.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it.
I wonder if anybody will ever, probably somebody has already, will ever mash up Star Trek and Star Wars in role play in a role play.
Oh, that would be fun.
That would be nuts.
I just want to put a Vulcan and a Jedi together and see what happens.
Oh my God! Right? Yeah, or even Cleon Cleon and the Sith, right? I mean, there's just so many, combinations.
Oh man.
Yeah, there's just so many combinations.
That'd be crazy.
But, yeah. But then, and what I love about both of these is that I've learned that there are people that have never, just may sound odd to you, there are people that have never watched Star Trek that play Star Trek Adventures, and then they go back and watch Star Trek. And I've seen that on the message boards, and I've seen the same thing on message boards for Star Wars. People know all about Star Wars, but they play the game and then they go back and watch the films. And I would never have thought of that.
I would think the reverse to be true, that you've watched it, you've invested in it, and now you want to play it.
Right. And the reverse is happening, that that these games are a gateway into these shows and films.
That's
which I think is extraordinary. Somebody told me the other day that the autobiography of Kirk was their gateway into Star Trek. I'm just like, what? Because I would never think that. And they were like, yeah, I always knew about Shatner and Captain Kirk, so I just figured, let me start with the autobiography. And that's how they got into Star Trek.
That's very cool.
You never know where someone is going to come in and how they're going to come in. And I think as long as as any of these pieces of merchandise are true, then that's fine,
Yeah. My plan from here, because I said I started with, I'm now in TNG. So I went from Strange New Worlds. I watched as much as I could handle of TOS. I bailed out in season 2. I just couldn't. And then I tried watching the animated series. I also decided I was simply not high enough for that. And then I went into TNG, and I've been enjoying that. So,
well, I have good news for you, Tim. The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko has been written with you and people like you in mind, because one of the things I wanted to do is I figured that there may be people that didn't watch Deep Space Nine, or maybe even not a lot of Trek, or if they did it when they were kids, and hadn't watched it in 20 odd years, 10, 15 years. Sure. So I wrote it in a style where if you have a little knowledge of Trek, that's great. You don't need to know every episode, everything, everything. You can start it off, read it, and once you get into it, it's a story that you'll be able to get into without, obviously without giving anything away. It's a story you'll be able to get into, and you're like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing. I see where this is going, and you'll be able to get into it, and you should be fine. And then
Awesome.
if you go and watch Deep Space Nine, you'll have a whole different understanding and flavor of the show. And then people that are well versed in Deep Space Nine, when they come to the book, they'll feel a certain comfort from,
Mhm.
like I said earlier at the top of the show, understanding where all those things come from. So I try to make it backwards compatible, I guess you could say.
I love that. That's great. It's like a nice ramp up into the show. Perfect. Okay.
And now, a word from our show sponsor, Level Up Sabers. Their link can be found in the show notes.
Now, Derek, I think we kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, just to see if you say anything different than what that we've already talked about.
Okay.
So I love to know what makes somebody tick, why they are who they are, why they do what they do. I love I love learning about people and their stories and everything else. So Derek, what makes you tick? What made you want to become a writer?
Okay, well, yeah, I did talk a little bit about that. I really gotta say, I really think it was Star Wars, man. I remember my parents were definitely a little, are a little eccentric for sure, and they would take their kid to like almost any movie. I mean, I was like a little kid going to like see Bond films, and I remember seeing like THX 1138 and stuff. And so I remember we went to a midnight show of Star Wars. And I remember seeing like that scene with the Star Destroyer, goes overhead. And I was in. I was in. I was all of like what, 10? And I wanted to know everything about it. I wanted to know how that was done. And I found out that there was this guy, George Lucas, and he wrote this stuff. And I was like, he wrote this, he created this. And my mom had brought me up on classic tales of the Odyssey, and by the time I was 10, I was already reading Shakespeare, and I was already reading the classics, and I was familiar with Dumas and all that stuff by that time. So that was like almost old hat to me, and so something that I could absorb and get into was like great. So then I remember finding out that I was excited that George Lucas did this, but I wanted to know what excited him. And then when I found out that a lot of his inspiration was samurai and Japanese culture, I dived into that. And so that started me on a whole venture of writing, screenwriting. And by the time that was like a journey of like 6 years. And by that, and I'm watching a lot of film. I probably watched about, in 6 years, from 10 to 16, I probably watched easily 1,000, 1,500 films, man, in that span. And that's the formative years, and
Sure.
And so I learned story, enjoying myself, but I learned story, I learned structure. I started reading books on writing, on screenwriting. And so then I started working on and writing a Star Wars script, because like kids do it at that age. And that stuck with me, that bug stuck with me. I left writing for a while as I got to be an adult. You become an adult, and you're like, oh, I'm going to do adult things, or I don't know if this no, writing's going to make any money for me. But I kept coming back to it. And a friend in 2005, he said, hey, there's this Star Trek Strange New Worlds anthology. It's a contest. You should, you should enter it. And I was like, oh, okay, let's see if I can still write. Let's see if I still got something, So I entered it, and I took first place in a story that dealt with Picard, Janeway, and the Q, with the Borg. The Q basically assimilate the Borg. Yeah. And I realized from there that, well, maybe, I have I really, really do have this thing about being I can, make a run at being a professional writer. And it was off to the races more or less at that point after that.
Love it. That's fantastic.
So, talking about how your mom got you into books, your Facebook also referred to you refer to yourself as a reader of banned books, which I 100% agree that banned books should be read. There is no reason to ban a book.
There's no reason to ban a book at all. I don't get it. And if it's banned, I want to read it.
Right.
Right?
I agree with that. So of the banned books that you have read, which one's your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the last one I read was The Hate You Give, right? That's a really good one. But you know what was recently banned was The Diary of Anne Frank.
Yeah.
I still can't believe that one. That's just
nuts.
Insane that they should get banned.
And I was like, what? So it's really weird. And first of all, we do live in the United States of America, and we have the freedoms to be offended. So that is fine.
Right.
That part is fine. But I think if one person is offended, then okay, they can voice that offense. But then don't ban a book or there's another thing that's happening I was reading about where people are just hiding books. They're going to libraries and bookstores and they're pulling them or hiding them in the other sections of a bookstore. So they'll take them like
wow.
I was reading this. I was reading this actually in the Chicago Tribune, and it's happening in other places. It was being noted in other places in the country where people they'll go to a bookstore, and if it's like, for example, the African American section, they'll take books and they'll put them like maybe in automotive, so that when you go to that section, you don't see that you can't find them, which is nuts. So it's not really book banning, but it's book hiding, which is just
right. But they can't get it out of the store because they either A, have to buy it, or B, steal it, and they don't want to get right.
So they hide it. And it's nuts.
So stupid. It's so stupid.
I just saw a thing today about The Diary of Anne Frank being banned and a teacher in Texas being fired for reading it to her students.
Right.
And it's because they're so offended that 13-year-olds are learning about this. And she was 13 when this happened.
Right.
Like,
I can understand. You said it earlier. I can understand somebody being offended, and you have the right to be offended, but you don't have the right to be offended for me.
Right.
Exactly. And it's really interesting that you have a lot of authors, and this is not solely authors of color. You have gay, trans, you have all different types of authors, and just because these authors are different than than other people, people are taking their books and either banning them or hiding them or this or that. And I'm like, that's crazy. They deserve a platform just as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
So I want to read anything by anyone, and I will also say that when I was writing the autobiography, these are things that I thought about, so I try and be inclusive in what I write because it's a book written about, right, Benjamin Sisko, who's a Black man, right? Okay, right. So of course there'll be a Black family in the book, but then as I'm writing it, and I'm like, well, I just don't want people of color to gravitate towards it. I want everyone and anyone to feel like, well, I can pick up this book and find myself in this book, right? Because that's the point, and that's not only the point of what I'm saying. That's the point of Star Trek. Right. That's why it's 57 years plus, is that we see ourselves in that hopeful future, right? All of us. So that's what I did in the book, is that anyone could pick this up, any economic status, any ethnicity, and they can find things in it. They're like, oh yeah, I have that in my family. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh yeah, I know that. And that's the point. Yeah. Is not to hide that, but to celebrate that. Right.
And that's great. I think one of the things that people forget, because we live in a culture where everything is, and we don't usually talk about anything that gets anywhere near political on this show, but we live in a culture where, oh, that's too woke. That's too woke. Go woke, go broke, all whatever those other guys say.
Right.
Whatever. But the thing that kills me is that when people complain about Star Trek being woke, and I'm like, guys, it has been woke since season 1, episode 1 of
man.
TOS.
Yeah, man.
If you haven't caught on to this, you were watching the wrong show somewhere, somehow. Because one of the things that people, especially when people have problem with someone of a different skin color, but they say they love Star Trek, and those people are out there.
Oh yeah.
And one of my favorite things to point out to some of these people is the episode where the face was half black, half white. Yeah. If you haven't watched that episode and gone back and thought about race relations afterwards, you missed the whole point of that show.
Let that be your battlefield. I mean, if you don't get it, it's a great episode.
Yeah.
For me, the best part of that episode is Kirk and Spock when Frank Gorshin, when he's explaining, he's like, well, Kirk and Spock are like, I don't see the difference in you guys. And he's like, what do you mean you don't see the difference? He's white on the right side, I'm black on the right side. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't, Kirk and Spock literally cannot, it's done so well because they literally can't get it around their heads what this dude is. It's like, what? But to him, it's like so blatant. It's like, can't you see the difference? And they're like, no.
Oh, man.
And I love that because that's where we should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that hopeful. That's that hopeful future.
Exactly.
Sorry, yeah. Oh, definitely. And I'm over here looking at the current banned books list, the ones that they're trying to ban this year with the I have that one, I have that one, I have that one.
Right. I mean, there's oh my God, it's like it's nuts. It's just
and
nuts.
The reasons, so this is the list of banned books and the reasons. And so The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, banned mostly in regard to passages that were considered sexually offensive, as well as for the tragic nature of the book, which some felt might be depressing for young readers.
Hello.
Imagine living in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam.
Right.
What was the sexual in nature in Diary of Anne Frank?
Because she talks about puberty. Because she's a 13-year-old girl and she's talking about the changes in her body and.
But when we were kids in that age, I mean, that's life in that age, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to leave this planet now. Can we get the Starship thing going so I can?
Like the only one that's on here that I can even be remotely with that might be a good idea. It's not even banning the book, but maybe not put it in schools, is Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, maybe not.
Well,
it's not in the young kids section.
It's not right. It's not in the young kids section.
I read that one in high school, and it was maybe we should.
And it's a good book. I mean,
it is a very good book.
Oh,
I remember when I was going to high school, my English teacher was talking about books that weren't allowed to be read in class and things. And she actually gave us a list of books that were not allowed to be read in the school. She's like, I can't give you these books to read,
right?
But I'm going to give you this list of books, and you need to go read them, because it was like Catcher in the Rye, 1984 by George Orwell.
1984.
And a couple of these other things where it was like, these are some seriously classic novels.
Catcher in the Rye is back on the list again.
It's back on the list. Well, it's always on the list, though.
It's always on the list.
It comes off for like a week, and they're like, no, put it back on. Put it back on.
To Kill a Mockingbird's on here. Of Mice and Men is on here. Grapes of Wrath. There was another
classic American literature. It's just if you don't, that makes me angry.
Gone with the Wind is on here again.
See, now I remember
Charlotte's Web. That was the other one that got me.
What?
Charlotte's Web?
You've got to be kidding me.
Banned due to themes of death and the fact that the main characters are talking animals.
All right, Karen, you need to go sit down and shut up.
Well,
wow. I can't. I just
Harry
can't.
Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone's on the banned books list.
Are you kidding me? Wow.
Banned for containing witchcraft, the occult, and anti-family themes.
Well, so my mom had me reading. When I was a kid, she seriously started me off with like the real Grimm's fairy tales at like.
I have that.
Yeah, at like 4 or 5, she started me off with Poe, and then I graduated up to Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So by the time I got to high school, Shakespeare was old hat,
Oh yeah.
you know. But I can't imagine one of the things that I loved reading in high school was Grapes of Wrath.
Mm-hmm.
You know, was Catcher in the Rye. What it was like, it was just so riveting reading these books at that age. They just captured me, and I can't imagine not having that experience at that age now.
Right. One of my favorite books of all time is on the banned books list now.
Yeah, that's nuts.
But like, so
Nuts.
one of the newest ones, it was a bestseller in 2006, and now Water for Elephants is on the banned books list.
Wow, I've never read that.
I love that book.
Why is that one banned? I'm just curious.
Sexual
at this point.
content, violence, and extensive use of swear words. It is seriously one of my favorite books I have ever read.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
was on Tom. So that was on there, right?
Which one?
The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That was on there, right?
Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, those are always on.
Oh, yeah,
on and off, on and
I
off.
think they
on and off all the time.
They might not be on this year's list, but I think they were on last year's list.
On last year's
Oh,
list.
they'll be back on by the end of the year. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's just nuts. I mean, I don't get it. You know, I just don't.
The fact though that Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is on here.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Anti-family themes.
Well, because he's an orphan.
I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but I've read the first one and it's fine. I mean, these are great themes for kids to get into. So I don't understand it.
Okay. I'm depressed now. We need to talk about something else. I'm depressed for the sake of humanity and the direction it's going. This is not the hopeful future we were looking for with Trek.
But
okay.
come on. One last one. Wrinkle in Time has been banned for various reasons. As for being too Christian and then also not being Christian enough. And then it was banned for its new age content.
Whatever.
That book, can I just say really quickly, I love that book. Madeline the Angle, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that book taught me about Tesseracts. And I remember as a kid, I must have been, I don't know, maybe 10, maybe younger. I didn't know what a Tesseract was. And so I looked it up and I started trying to read everything I could about Tesseracts. So you're telling me if I hadn't had that, you know, what would that not have done to my brain, right? Because are you kidding me?
Yup.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. I just wanted
to... No, that's fine. Tim's just sad now. Okay. Well, let's talk about something else that makes me happy. Let's talk about Batman. I love Batman. And
Batman
you wrote I'm gonna call it a fan fiction comic about Batman, where he's not the Batman. He's just a crazy person in Arkham Asylum as a patient. Now, years ago, I saw a meme about a similar topic about this, where Batman is again a patient in Arkham, and all the people who are the villains in the story are just people who work at the asylum, and and it explained who all these different people were. So, in your version of this, how did the story come to be for you, and how did you get to this point? Because I love this concept where Batman's not a real thing. It's just something that he's built up in his mind.
Well, is he a real thing or is he not a real thing? I went to the School of Visual Arts. Part of my own self journey to kind of like learn to write. I told you I taught myself a lot about writing. One of the things I felt that I needed some tutelage and some learning about, some education about, was learning how to write for comics. Mm-hmm. And so I out of my own, paid off my own dime, I went to the School of Visual Arts, and Dennis O'Neill was teaching how to write for comics. And I never connected the name. I took the class. I went to the school, I took the class, and I'm sitting in the class the first day. I'm like, oh, this is that Dennis O'Neill. At the time, he was the chief editor for the line of Batman titles. And he is like, well, we're gonna take the whole semester and we're gonna create a comic. And I'm gonna walk you through everything it is to create a comic, but I'm also going to teach you about how to write for comics. But what he really did in that semester was talk about and teach writing. And if I ever had any one instructor, I've had a few people along the way, but if I ever had any one instructor talk about and teach me different things about writing, it was definitely Denny O'Neil.
Okay.
And it was just fortuitous because a lot of the people that came to the class would brought their comics, and after every class, they would want him to sign. The first or second class, he did it. After that, he's like, look, if you're here for me to sign comics, I'm not doing that. I'm here to teach a class. So just don't bring, I'm teaching a class. I came to learn how to write for comics and how to write. So I just would ask every question. It got to a point where he was like, is there anyone other than Derek that has a question? And when people wouldn't answer, he was like, all right, Derek, what's your... And so it almost became like a conversation between the two of us. And at the end of that first semester, he taught me so much. And then at the end of that first semester, I went to him the last day with my comics. I waited until the last day, and asked him to sign them. And I said to him, I would like to take this class again, but I don't want to pay for it because I'm going to SV on my own dime.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you want to audit my class? You don't want to, he's like, all right. He's like, you could do that, but you can't just come in and out. You have to be here every day. You have to come and you have to, come a second year and take it. And I was like, you have my word. So I came a second year. And it was the same thing the next year. Nobody really had a lot of questions. There was some, but people just wanted him to sign books. So I sat in front of the class and I got a second year out of Dennis O'Neil.
Nice.
Which is nuts, man. But I learned a lot about Batman. We talked a lot about the psychology of Batman. I asked a lot of questions about different forms of writing, different ways to write. And one of the things that I got from Denny is that, he firmly believed by that point in his teaching that Bruce Wayne was really gone and that Batman was a dominant persona and Bruce Wayne was just another disguise that Batman used to get in and out of places, And so years later, I was like, you know what? I don't know if I ever get an opportunity to write a Batman comic. And a friend of mine was like, why don't you just do it? Just don't charge people. Just do it, just to prove to yourself that you can write a comic and do it. You have all that knowledge and experience. I'm like, you know what? You're right. So I found an artist and I just wrote a 6-page story. And I think it's a decent story. And it's an homage, not just to Batman, but to everything that Denny O'Neil, taught me. And so, is that Bruce Wayne in an asylum? Is that Batman captured in a place? Which is that? There's hopefully a lot going on in that. One of the things that some people don't notice is that the color bleeds out from page 1 to page 6.
I was noticing that actually.
Right. The doctor's name on her name tag is very interesting. If you look at the doctor's name tag, I just leave that there.
I'm gonna go back and look at that now.
Yeah, look at that. So there's little things going on. So, you see what's happening and what's going on. And I will also say that's the first 6 pages to a 22-page script that I wrote. And that's just the first 6. So.
Well, I'll say 2 things. Number one, the writing style I thought was very good.
Thank you.
And so I look forward. Now that I know there's more than that, I want to read the rest of it. So. So chop, let's make that happen. Secondly,
right.
Secondly, and I don't remember who the artist's name was, but you have it listed on your website there, and you can find his work on DeviantArt. But the artwork is top shelf.
Yeah,
the artist did a phenomenal job depicting the Joker, and so it was a nod to classic Joker, but also had some of his own flair to it. And so I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, that was 2014, 2015. I can't say it was a gentleman that I found, and I found him on DeviantArt, and he had images just postings of Batman, and we talked about it a lot. And he said, yeah, I love drawing Batman. I'm like, well, have you done any comic work? And he's like, no, I just really love doing Batman. And So I was like, look, I have the script. I've written it. I'm looking for an artist, Joshua Suarez. And I was like, hey, Josh, if you want, I'll pay you the going rates, man. And he read the script, and I just took the first 6 pages out of my 22-page script, and he was like, oh, I like this, and we did it, and we did it in like, I don't know, it wasn't that long for him. He did all that digitally. He had just bought like a digital thing he was working on, and I think he did it like in 2 weeks. All
right,
really,
cool.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I if you want guys who want to take a look at this, if you go to Derek's website, which we'll have listed in the show notes down below, you can find it there, and it's really cool. It's a fun read. It's a cool read. Please go check it out. And so those other 16 pages, chip, chop, chip. Let's make that happen. So no pressure though. No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. Yeah.
So, Derek, as Tim warned you at the beginning of the interview, we do our silly introduction, our serious introduction, we ask some questions, and then, because our questions are not silly enough, we ask a silly question. We have a specifically silly question, and it was one that I had asked a couple of times because I feel that it's a question that once you're past about the age of 6, nobody really cares about anymore, and that is a darn shame in my mind. So, Derek, what is your favorite dinosaur?
I love that response.
Well, I mean, of course, it used to be like the T-Rex, right? Because like my girlfriend is like, oh, you're like a T-Rex, right? You have these shoulders and you have these arms, right? And she's a little right, but don't tell her.
Secret safe here.
Right, but now, thanks to Steven Spielberg, it's got to be like the Velociraptor because they're like wicked and they're smart, So I would say Velociraptor probably, yeah.
Ooh, that is a solid answer.
Good
I
answer.
love the excitement on people's faces though when you ask them what their favorite dinosaur is, and it's that like, nobody's asked me that since I was 6. Like,
right,
yes!
right, yeah.
Yeah, we love that. We used to ask a variety of different questions, and we kind of settled on this one because we started asking, and your reaction is not uncommon, and I love that. It's that pure moment of bliss and happiness when somebody's like, oh, I get to talk about my dinosaurs. Yeah, so it's just cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because for some silly reason that's just not cool after a certain age, and that's lame because dinosaurs are fantastic.
No, dinosaurs are cool. I have a dinosaur script in my head.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it's nuts, but I think I'm gonna get to it at some point next year because it's nuts, but it could work. It could work. It could work. At least I think it could work. So yeah.
Yay!
All right, cool.
More dinosaur stuff. Oh goodness, Derek, thank you so much for being on our show with us today. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to find out more about you and your work?
Kathleen, thank you very much, and Tim, thank you both for having me. Well, you can find me on my website, derekattico.com. And my handle is Dattico, Dattico, on social media, pretty much everywhere. Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter.
It's still Twitter.
It's still Twitter. Okay, Facebook.
The social media formerly known as Twitter.
Right, the social media formerly known as Instagram, everywhere. Just Dattico, Dattico, and reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to people and talk to all of them about dinosaurs and Batman and Star Trek.
And Star Trek, of course.
And the autobiography comes out on November 21st, which is a Tuesday, and it's still available for pre-orders if anyone wants to pre-order.
Awesome. Well, we are definitely going to link your socials, and seriously, guys, pre-order the book. Do it. You're not going to regret
amazing.
it.
Not going to regret it.
It does sound amazing.
I'm excited to get my hands on it. So
I love Deep Space Nine so much. Like, awesome. It was my introduction to Trek. Like, because I was a kid when it was airing, and my parents were watching it, and I grew up watching it, and then it was this is the best, and I love this, and then I fell in love with Voyager. But no.
You should have seen her when Armin Shimmerman was on the show. She absolutely fangirled.
I died a little bit. It was great. He's amazing.
Yeah,
and then he sent an autographed picture to my mom.
Oh, that's cool.
It was so cool, and I didn't tell her about it. And then she got it in the mail, and she called me, and she's like, what is this? I'm like, what is what? What is this picture that I got? I'm like, I don't know. What is it? She's like, it's Quark covered in tribbles. I'm like, oh, that's the one he's saying? A great one.
That's a great gift to give mom.
It was so cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Very
That's
cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we want to remind you that subscribing is the single most important thing you can do to help our show continue to grow and get amazing guests like Derek Tyler Attico here. By the way, this has been just an absolutely phenomenally enjoyable conversation with Derek, and there's a bunch of funny moments to listen to. And by the way, there's some moments that have not been included in this edit of the episode. You can only find them on our Patreon channel, and you can find that there with 5 different levels of subscription from $1 to $40. And so go check us out on Patreon. Find out what things we talked about that had us laughing, maybe crying, maybe a little bit of sneezing. Who knows? Anyway, go check it out.
Throwing his pens at the computer.
I did throw my pen at the computer. That was stupid. Anyway, but yeah, go check that out. And please go check out Derek's work. And you are definitely going to want to get in on that pre-order for the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, Captain Sisko, if you will. But if for whatever reason you are not happy with the content of our show today, please feel free to lodge a complaint with the head of our complaint department. That, of course, is the man Quark. Yes, this Ferengi found out there was a potential for profit in the trading of information. Sometimes there's important information, and sometimes it's just 2 copies of a complaint form telling them how much we suck at our job. Now, the really sucky part for us is we'll never know how bad the punishment will be, because it all depends on really how bad we did, or even more so, on how much gold press latinum you have in your storehouse.
Oh.
All right, Derek, again, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And that's going to yeah, absolutely. And that's going to finish us off for the FSF PopCast. Goodbye.
Copyright 2023 FSF PopCast.
Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF PopCast. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com. Original music by Jordan Michaels.